going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the JT Sports Podcast. I'm your host, JT. The NFL let both of Deion Sanders' sons slide in the draft, and now they look stupid because both Shilo and Shedeur Sanders were balling out during OTAs and mini camps. Shilo, he was getting rave reviews from the Buccaneers staff, including head coach Todd Bowles, who was really impressed with his footwork, his instincts, the demonstration of great leadership that he showed, and he also was impressed with his high IQ. And Shilo will make the Buccaneers roster this year. There is a place in the NFL for Shilo Sanders. I always felt that he was a really good player. He just was more so playing a tad bit out of position. I view Shilo Sanders as a nickel or dime linebacker. He's better when he's able to play near the line of scrimmage, when he can better impact the run game. He also can cover running backs and tight ends. There's a spot on this Buccaneers roster for Shilo Sanders, and I'll be shocked if he doesn't end up making the final 53. Shedeur Sanders, on the other hand, Shedeur has been the Browns' best quarterback during OTAs and mini camps. He threw the most touchdowns out of any quarterback on that roster. He had the highest completion percentage as well. And every time you hear Browns players discuss Shedeur, it makes you believe that this is the guy that the locker room is rallying behind because they believe he truly gives this team the best shot at winning this year. And Shedeur will eventually start this year. I have no doubts about that. The owner was the person who made the decision to get Shedeur Sanders, and for a very good reason. The Browns aren't going to be good this year. So by the time you get to week 12, week 13, you're 2-10, 2-11. The season is all but over. How you can keep fans engaged and keep the ticket sales coming in along with the merchandise and ratings is by starting the chosen son of Deion Sanders. And with Shedeur Sanders eventually coming in, not only is he going to draw a lot of eyes and ratings, but the amount of cash that's going to come with that. The owner doesn't want to see Dylan Gabriel out there. He doesn't want to see Kenny Pickett, and he probably doesn't want to see too much of Joe Flacco if he's not producing. The NFL is a business, and if you're not winning, you definitely better be generating revenue, and Shedeur is going to do that. And out of all of the bad decisions that Jimmy Haslam has made, from giving Deshaun Watson the worst contract in the history of sports, drafting Johnny Manziel, getting Shedeur Sanders is the best decision he has ever made, because this was a first-round talent that slipped through the drafts due to things that we never will truly know the truth about. But from what we've seen out of Shedeur so far, with what he's done in the community of Cleveland, what he has said during the press conferences, it doesn't make me believe that there was a lot of truth to those character concerns that folks had about him during the draft process. It doesn't make me believe fully that he was going into these interviews acting like he was Satan. Maybe these coaches didn't really understand Shedeur Sanders. And maybe there were some things that Shedeur didn't really understand about these coaches. But it doesn't matter at this point. All that is hearsay. When you watch Shedeur, he has handled everything like a pro, and he, without a doubt, will be not just the long-term quarterback of the Browns, but finally the quarterback that Browns fans can call a franchise QB. They haven't had one since the beginning of time. I don't think the Browns have ever had a franchise quarterback. You had Baker Mayfield, but you didn't get the Baker Mayfield that we see in Tampa that has become somewhat of a top 10 quarterback. Back then, he was on the rise, but still very inconsistent. But Shedeur, with him having the genes and the blood of Deion Sanders, I just can't imagine him not being a great quarterback. Will he be the best quarterback in the NFL? No, but you don't need to be the most talented nor the best to win the Super Bowl. Jalen Hurts constantly gets berated and torn down because he's not as talented as Lamar or Josh Allen, but yet he's been the only one to beat Patrick Mahomes in the Super Bowl other than Tom Brady. So Shedeur has the skill set. He has the intangibles to be a very high-level quarterback for the Cleveland Browns. And both of Deion Sanders' sons, Shilo and Shedeur, they've made a lot of impressive plays up to this point during the offseason. Of course, it's all OTAs and minicamp. We won't really know how good these two truly are until training camp rolls around. But if you're dominating in minicamp, you more than likely will be able to repeat that during training camp, especially Shilo, now that he'll truly be able to show the kind of player that he is. Shilo is a really physical player. So with him being this good without pads makes me believe that he's definitely going to make the roster when he's able to go out and hit somebody, because at Colorado, he was doing nothing but laying down the hit stick. And Shedeur, if you're dominating third stringers and backups, it shows that you're not getting tested. You need more competition because it's just too easy for you. So the Browns have no choice but to give him first team reps. It's just too easy for him. How can you evaluate every single quarterback when Shedeur is just dominating against guys who more than likely won't make the roster? And it confuses me how Kevin Stefanski said that this was an open competition for the starting quarterback job. Everybody will be evaluated the same, yet Shedeur is the only quarterback who has yet to receive first-team reps. Are they trying to make him work harder for it? Are they really trying to make him prove himself? Maybe that's what the case is, because I really can't tell you what the logic is. If I was a coach and I was having a quarterback competition, I wouldn't flat out name Shedeur the starter, but I would make sure that all four of the quarterbacks in this competition had the same amount of first-team reps. But Deion Sanders has to be really proud right now because both of his sons, who were heavily criticized, it was a lot of scrutiny around how good they truly were. They're making the NFL look really dumb for passing on them. Shilo went undrafted when I thought he at least could have been a 6th or 7th round pick. But, you know, he's making the most out of his opportunity. Same thing with Shedeur, and that's all that matters. And eventually the NFL is going to look back on Shedeur and Shiloh's draft slides, and you're going to have a lot of GMs and coaches who got fired saying, damn, maybe I still would have had a job if I would have took one of Deion's sons. Chad Ochocinco not being in the Hall of Fame is a crime against football. The Hall of Fame is supposed to celebrate the best players of their respective eras. And there weren't too many receivers during the 2000s that were better than Ocho. Outside of Randy Moss, Torrey Holt, Big T.O., and Marvin Harrison, Ocho was a top 5 receiver during the era of the 2000s. He was arguably the best route runner to ever play wide receiver. He changed the game in a sense where he kind of was the soldier boy of the NFL. He was like social media before social media truly became a big thing. He was fun to watch, and he has good enough numbers that have a legit case of making it to the Hall of Fame. He was a 3-time All-Pro selection, 2-time first-team All-Pro, 1-time second-team All-Pro selection, and he had 6 seasons where he had at least 1,100 receiving yards or more, and he was a top 5 player at his position. The Hall of Fame is supposed to be where the best players of their respective eras end up getting enshrined in immortality. And Chad Ochocinco belongs with a shrine in Canton. This is one of those kinds of receivers where the stats don't always do him justice. If you were to watch Chad Ochocinco play, you would know just how dominant he was during his prime. It's not all about stats when it comes to deciding who gets into the Hall of Fame, because sometimes the stats can be misrepresented. Yes, Chad Ochocinco didn't have the longevity that guys like Larry Fitzgerald and Steve Smith had, but when he was in his prime, he was better than those two guys. I would take a prime Ocho over Steve Smith any day of the week. Eli Manning, his sole reason for being in the Hall of Fame one day is because he beat Tom Brady in the Super Bowl twice. That's it. There's more than one way to become a Hall of Famer outside of just having these great stats. Can you tell the story of the NFL during the 2000s without Chad Ochocinco? No, you can't. When you think of the best receivers from that era, Chad Ochocinco is going to come to the forefront of your brain. And that's what a Hall of Fame player is to me. It's not about how many great numbers did you have, how many Super Bowl rings did you have. Who cares about rings as a wide receiver? Rings are more so something that you define a quarterback's Hall of Fame candidacy on, because they have the largest impact on wins and postseason success. If you would have stuck Chad Ochocinco in his prime on the New England Patriots, he definitely would have been a surefire Hall of Famer, because more people would have been watching him. Nobody was really watching the Cincinnati Bengals like that other for Chad Ochocinco. And he is the Cincinnati Bengals all-time record holder in receptions, yards, touchdowns. Not only is he one of the best Bengals players ever, but from a skill set standpoint, there's no better route runner that has played this position than Ocho. He definitely has a fair claim to being a Hall of Famer just because of the impact that he had on this game during his time. Yeah, there are guys that aren't in the Hall of Fame yet that definitely should get in before him. I'm not saying that Chad Ochocinco should be a first ballot Hall of Famer. But what I am saying is that at some point, he should be in the Hall of Fame. The Hall of Fame is supposed to celebrate greats. It's supposed to celebrate guys who defined their era. And nobody defined the wide receiver position during the 2000s better than what Chad Ochocinco did. That is his claim to being in the Hall of Fame. You don't always have to have a 15-year career playing way into your prime or way past your prime to be a Hall of Famer. Luke Kuechly's going to the Hall of Fame, and he didn't play as long as some of the other linebackers that are in over him. But when he was on the field in his peak, he was arguably the best linebacker ever. Patrick Willis is going to be a Hall of Famer. His career didn't last that long. Chad Ochocinco had a pretty lengthy prime. He had 6-7 years that he played elite football, where he was a top 3, top 5 player at his position. And in some years, like in 2006, when he led the NFL in receiving yards, you could have made the claim that he was the best receiver in the league at that time. There's a reason why he was a first-team All-Pro selection twice. He's the only receiver since Jerry Rice to lead his conference in receiving yards for 4 consecutive seasons. When Chad Ochocinco was playing, he was a dog, and I don't think enough people really understand how truly good Ocho was, because you know, of the off-the-field stuff that he got into. Listen, Lawrence Taylor is a registered sex offender. You feel me? O.J. Simpson killed somebody, and he's still in the Hall of Fame. And let's not act like the football field is some moral high ground where you find all of the best characters. There are guys who have did far more worse than what Chad Ochocinco has done off the field. Terrell Owens, it took him hella long to get into the Hall of Fame, but eventually he got in. I'm judging Ocho based off what he was as a football player and what he was during his peak from 2000 to 2008, 2009 was a top 5 receiver every single season. That belongs in the Hall of Fame. You cannot talk about the NFL from the era of the 2000s when it comes to wide receivers, leaving out Chad Ochocinco. That's why he should be in the Hall of Fame. He's not one of those Hall of Very Good players. Listen, Julian Edelman was a great player for the New England Patriots, but he's not a Hall of Famer. He never was a Pro Bowler. He never was a All-Pro selection. Chad Ochocinco was. He had better numbers than Michael Irvin. Yes, it was 2 different eras, but they weren't too different. The NFL was still pretty run-heavy when Chad Ochocinco was playing. Chad Ochocinco should be in Canton. And it's just an absolute travesty that we have to deal with all of these politics that's keeping him out of it. He shouldn't have to make his own Hall of Fame jacket. He should be given one because he deserves to have one. He deserves to have a shrine in Canton. A guy like Chad Ochocinco that produced multiple 1,100 plus receiving seasons, that also was always one of the top at his positions every single year in his prime, should have a shrine and immortality in Canton. This is the most dangerous Chicago Bears team since 1985. This is a squad that is good enough to win it all this year, and nobody wants to admit it. The Bears have one of the most complete teams entering this upcoming NFL season. You got the new Sean McVay as your head coach, who fixes your poor coaching issue that held you back last season. Ben Johnson, not only is he going to have Caleb Williams playing good football, but he's going to have Caleb Williams playing at an MVP level. Caleb Williams was tabbed as the second coming of Patrick Mahomes coming out of college, and you saw glimpses of that last year. But the poor coaching, they didn't know how to put that talent in the right place for it to truly flourish. And coaching is everything in this league. If you don't have a good coach, there's a high possibility that you don't end up living up to your full potential. Caleb Williams didn't want to play for the Bears initially for a very good reason, because he didn't like the coaching staff, and he was right about everything that he was concerned about. So you get Ben Johnson, who, like Sean McVay, when he first got to the Rams, he had to work with Jared Goff, who was a former first overall pick. And at the time, nobody really knew if Jared Goff had any juice. Sean McVay rolls in and has Jared Goff eventually becoming an MVP finalist. And in his first season as the head coach of the Rams, he leads them to their first playoff berth in over 13 years. Ben Johnson can do the same thing with the Chicago Bears. We haven't seen this team in the playoffs since they had Matt Nagy as their head coach. It's been a while. And with the innovation that Ben Johnson brings to this offense, the Bears are going to have the most prolific offense in the NFL this year. They have no weakness on that side of the ball. They have an improved offensive line. They've given Caleb Williams presidential security up front. You got a good stable of running backs with DeAndre Swift, Roschon Johnson. You just have a bevy of riches at the receiver position. I mean, DJ Moore, Luther Burden, Cole Kmet, Colson Loveland, who's like Diet Brock Bowers. The list just goes on. And if you thought the Bears' offense was stacked, have you seen their defense? I mean, that secondary is downright nasty. Jalen Johnson, Jaquan Brisker, Kyler Gordon. Yeah, I ain't forget about Kyler Gordon. And then they got Dennis Allen as their defensive coordinator. Not only are the Bears going to win the NFC North this year, but I wouldn't be surprised if they end up having the best record in the NFC this year. This is one of the best rosters entering this season, and the media isn't talking about how good this team truly is. You want to define what the future of a franchise is based off the past? What kind of logic is that? If that's the case, the Chargers should have never made it to the playoffs last year with Jim Harbaugh being their head coach. Coaching changes everything. This is not the same old Bears team. I'm getting so tired of hearing the Bears get hyped up every year. They were supposed to be good last year. They had an ass coach. Stop judging teams based off the past and judge them based off what you see in front of you. And what you see when you look at this Bears depth chart is a top 5 roster, the second most talented roster in the NFC, with a quarterback that has the potential to be the best quarterback in the league. Caleb Williams is going to be a top 5 quarterback this year under Ben Johnson. With the amount of talent that he has, you give that to Ben Johnson? Can you imagine the damage that these two brothers are about to impose on the NFC for the next decade to come? You think that the Lions want to see Ben Johnson, the architect of the best offense in the NFL for the last 2-3 seasons, twice in a year? Absolutely not. Do not sleep on the Chicago Bears being a Super Bowl contender this year. We saw the Commanders come one game shy of making it to the Super Bowl. Their first season under Dan Quinn, when you get the coach right and you get quarterback right, you can compete in the NFC, especially with Caleb Williams being more physically gifted than every other quarterback in this conference but Jaden Daniels. The Bears need to be taken more seriously as Super Bowl contenders. I am so sick and tired and really annoyed with this team being defined by history. History doesn't win football games. Every season that starts up is a clean slate. It doesn't matter what you did in the 1990s. It doesn't matter what you did in the 2000s. It doesn't matter what you did last year. What matters is what the Bears are going to do this year, and that's kick ass and be the best team in the NFC and possibly make it to the Super Bowl year one under Ben Johnson. This dude is a wizard. He's a mastermind. He is a student of the game. Ben Johnson, I'm not telling you that he will fail. I'm guaranteeing that he will succeed and that he will become the new Kyle Shanahan, Sean McVay of the NFL. The schemes that he runs, the play calls that he's able to create off the whim, you give that with a quarterback that has the creativity of a Caleb Williams, with a good receiving core, with a great offensive line, and a great defense, the Bears are going to shock the world this year. This is the biggest sleeper team in the NFL, and by far the most disrespected team of this offseason. Nobody's going to be able to call the Raiders a free win this season. They finally have a real quarterback and head coach now. Do y'all remember last year when there were folks out there who thought that Aiden O'Connell could be the next coming of Tom Brady? And y'all may think I'm trying to be funny. No, there were really people out there who thought that AOC would have been the second coming of Tom Brady, and they thought that Antonio Pierce would have been great value Mike Tomlin. Look how that panned out. So you don't have to deal with another offseason of just gassing up anything just for the sake of blindly being optimistic about the Raiders. No, the Raiders actually have a real reason to be excited about this team this year. You got Geno Smith, who's going to give you solid quarterback play, who's going to keep you in games, possibly win a good amount of them, especially some games that you have no business losing, and you pair him back up with Pete Carroll, the head coach who had Geno Smith playing the best football of his career when nobody expected it. The Raiders offense also has some dudes around Geno Smith this year. There's been a lot of questions about who else is Geno Smith going to have outside of Brock Bowers, the best tight end in the league, and Ashton Jeanty, who's going to be a top 3 running back by the end of this season. He has Jacoby Myers, who has always been a really productive wide receiver too. You got Jack Bett, who was a day 2 selection. He could be this year's Lad McConkey, really good slot receiver. He's a great route runner with good hands. If you want to have a cheat sheet to finding out who's going to be a good receiver as a rookie, try to find the receivers that have crisp route running. When you think of the best receivers in the game, CeeDee Lamb, Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson, whoever else, what they all have in common is that they are very good route runners. If you can create separation and you can get open, the quarterback is going to find you. Jack Beck is going to have a monster rookie season. And let's not forget about Big Play Tucker, a.k.a. Trey Tucker. It seemed like every time AOC, Gardner Minshew, whoever they had at QB was going deep, it was going to Trey Tucker, and he was making nothing but big splash plays. And that offensive line, like before the draft, I got into a bunch of arguments over how high Ashton Jeanty should go. And there were some proponents about the Raiders taking him because the offensive line wouldn't be good enough for him to succeed. Have you seen the Raiders starting center, Jackson Powers Johnson? He lives up to that name because he's nothing but a monster, and he plays with a lot of power. I saw him pancaking a hell of a amount of guys last season. This dude is built like a tank. And I'm not saying that to be hyperbolic. He is. Go and watch that video when Ashton Jeanty first got up with Jackson Powers Johnson. I was like, holy crap. And people are saying that the Raiders offensive line is a question mark. This dude is gigantic. And he moves incredibly well. Now, the defense, they need some work on this side of football, but you do have Patrick Graham, who is one of the more respected defensive coordinators in the game. You got Matt Max. We know how good he is. Don't need to get too much into him. You got a solid defensive line with some really good depth. You improve your linebacker room. Jermaine Pratt led the Bengals in tackles last year. They definitely are going to miss him. It was idiotic for them to cut him in the first place. Devin White. Look, if Pete Carroll can revive Geno Smith's career, he can revive Devin White's career. Devin White, at one point, we were talking about this dude like he was going to be the second coming of Ray Lewis, and I don't know what the hell happened since, but hopefully Pete Carroll can work some of that magic on him. Tommy Eichenberg goes into his second season. Really smart player out of Ohio State. I thought he would have got more playing time last year. Now, the secondary, Jacorian Bennett, Eric Stokes, Jeremy Chan, they don't really excite me that much, but if you get that pass rush going, it doesn't really matter who you have playing cornerback. But you know what can make the Raiders defense downright scary this year? If you can get a healthy Christian Wilkins. Can you imagine the duo of Christian Wilkins and Max Crosby? The amount of hell that they're going to raise on opposing offenses? Now, I don't know when Christian Wilkins is going to return. He was supposed to already done healed from his foot injury that he suffered last year, but it's a Jones fracture. And if you remember the Kevin Durant injury that he had with OKC, when he had a Jones fracture, it kept him out for some while. And there really is no timetable for return when it comes to a Jones fracture, but he should be ready to play at some point during this season. And when he comes back, this Raiders defense is going to look completely different with him on the field, because now you're going to have two of not just the best pass rushers in the league at their respective positions, but also two of the best run stoppers in the league at their respective positions. And if you want to run away from Max Crosby, how are you going to try to run away from Christian Wilkins? When you have a dominant defensive tackle, it changes your approach on offense, because they just can blow shit up. And no matter if you want to try to run the ball away from them, no matter if you want to try to chip them with another guy. You can't stop a dominant defensive tackle. That's why they get paid a lot of money, because they are incredibly rare to find. Not just are they incredibly rare, but you don't find a lot of Christian Wilkins growing on trees every day. You normally find either a defensive tackle that's a bona fide run stopper, offers you little to nothing when it comes to getting after the quarterback, or a really good pass rushing defensive tackle that sucks against the run. Christian Wilkins gives you the best of all worlds. So when he comes back, he's going to make this defense a ton more scarier. And overall, when you see the Raiders on your schedule this year, do not mark them up as an automatic win, because they can beat anybody on any given Sunday, no matter if it's the Kansas City Chiefs, the Baltimore Ravens, the Philadelphia Eagles. You can line the Raiders up with any of the best teams in the NFL this year, and there's not a single game that they don't have the ability to win. They're going to be a scrappy team. They're going to fight. They're going to have a lot of high energy. For Pete Carroll to be the oldest coach in the NFL, the dude never looks like it. He's always hyped up, energetic. He's practicing with the players. I'm like, Pete Carroll, slow down out there now, buddy. So slow down out there now. You don't want your heart rate. You don't want your blood pressure going up too much. But for somebody to be this old, Pete Carroll has the energy of a 23-year-old. He has more energy than me, and I'm 23. Do not look at the Raiders as an easy win, no matter who you are, because they can beat anybody with what they have this year. They may not be a playoff team, but I wouldn't be surprised if they made it. This is a formidable squad. It's not going to be a walk in the park when you play the Raiders anymore this year. The Falcons are going to be sending airstrikes on offense all season long this year. You got Michael Penix entering year 2, who has a RPG for a left arm. He has one of the strongest arms in the history of football. He was making throws last season that only 1% of quarterbacks in this league have the ability to make. And you can definitely see why Raheem Morris and company fell in love and they drafted him. It took us all by surprise, but that pick aged perfectly, because Michael Penix has the potential to evolve this Atlanta offense into the most explosive unit in the National Football this league. In the 3 games that Michael Penix started last year, 15.5% of his passing attempts resulted and plays that went for 16 yards or more. He led all quarterbacks in the last 3 games of the season in air yards per attempt at 10.2. The man just has a knack for generating big plays throwing the football. He can fit it into a cover 2 hole shot with a safety closing in. There's no such thing as a throw that you shouldn't make when you have Michael Penix, Mr. RPG for the lefty, at quarterback. And the Falcons plan on creating a nuclear offense around this extraordinary arm that they have back there. They're going to evolve this offense to where they're going to be more aggressive at pushing the ball downfield. He should end up leading the NFL in passing yards and yards per play when you have 2 really good big play threats out wide, and Drake London, who had the most quietest 1,200-yard season that you will ever see. He doesn't get enough respect. Drake London is the most underrated receiver in the NFL. The dude was absolutely balling out on my fantasy team last year. Darnell Mooney was a really underrated free agency signing that didn't get talked about too much, but he was really good for the Falcons last year. They quietly have one of the best receiving duos in the NFL going into this season. You got Bijan Robinson. We should see more of him in the passing game this year. What was so great about Bijan Robinson as a prospect when he was coming out of Texas was that he wasn't just your traditional running back. He has the ability to be a weapon. He can line out in the slot and play receiver. You can line him out wide, and he can play outside receiver. There are just so many creative ways to get Bijan Robinson the ball that the Falcons haven't tapped into yet. So everything that the Falcons have around Michael Penix this year gives him the perfect situation to have a breakout season and to lead the Falcons to the NFC South crown this year. I have them winning this division. I don't have a lot of faith in Raheem Morris, but I believe in Michael Penix. And if you have a good quarterback, you can overcome average coaching, especially in a division that's home to nothing but average coaches. Raheem Morris, say what you want to about him not being trustworthy. He beat Todd Bowles twice last year with Kirk Chains. So if he can beat Todd Bowles, who isn't that good of a coach either, he can easily win this division with Michael Penix and possibly win a playoff game if they have that defense right. But this is an offense that's going to be incredibly prolific at just ripping off big plays in chunks. You're going to see a 15-yard gain here, a 30-yard gain there, a 50-yard touchdown bomb, Penix to Drake London there. This is going to be a really devastating offense when defenses have to game plan for this, because there's just certain things that you don't have an answer for. And with Michael Penix ripping off that left RPG, just making all kinds of impossible throws in tight spaces, I don't see too many offenses being more explosive than what the Falcons offense is going to be this year. I love me some Michael Penix. This is a quarterback that, coming out of Washington, was incredibly accurate throwing the deep ball, especially outside of the numbers. And although his completion percentage wasn't that impressive, remind you that he got thrown into a situation that he was never expected to be in. He never was supposed to play last year. The plan was that he sat for a year or two behind Kirk Cousins. But since Father Time came and snatched up Kirk Cousins and kidnapped him out of nowhere, Raheem Morris had to do what he could to salvage what was left of the season. And when he did that, you saw Michael Penix show a lot of promise, which is why this Falcons offense has evolved around him this offseason. And in 2025, you're just going to see an offense that has a lot of similarities to what the Bengals offense was when they made their Super Bowl run 3 years ago. This is what this offense reminds me a lot of. You got great receivers with the quarterback that's just relentless at attacking the ball downfield. I'm really excited for what the Falcons offense is going to be this season. There's a few players in the NFL right now that get cooked on social media nonstop for absolutely no reason at all. I want to give you guys 6 NFL players that are overhated, starting with Brock Purdy. He gets hated on because he was the last pick of the draft and he's done nothing but win for the 49ers. Yes, last season was a little bit of a downer for him, but how good are you supposed to be when you're down pretty much all of your best players on offense? Even the best quarterbacks in the league would have somewhat of a regression if they were in Brock Purdy's shoes. But just because he was Mr. Irrelevant and he's been able to take the 49ers to 2 conference championship games and a Super Bowl over the last 3 years, he gets called being a system quarterback when Trey Lance couldn't succeed in the same situation, and he was drafted ahead of Brock Purdy. He was supposed to be more talented than Brock Purdy, and yet, where is he at? Where is Jimmy Garoppolo at? He's a backup. So if Brock Purdy is this system quarterback and every quarterback that gets plugged into Kyle Shanahan's offense turns into gold, why is he the most successful one of the bunch? He's a top 10 quarterback, and people only hate on him because of where he was drafted, when if he was a first-round pick, everybody would be singing his praises. The Brock Purdy hate makes absolutely no sense to me. Rashad Bateman, he gets hated on because of the slow start that his career got out to. He was a former first-round pick out of Minnesota. He battled through injuries his first couple of years, but last year, He had a breakout campaign. He had career highs in touchdowns, receiving yards. He's one of the best route runners in the league. He creates a lot of separation on his routes. He just got a well-earned new extension. And some folks I was arguing with on X were saying that they overpaid for a wide receiver 3. He is not the third best receiver on the Ravens. If this was a prime DeAndre Hopkins that we were talking about, absolutely. But this is a DeAndre Hopkins that is just chasing a ring at this point. Rashad Bateman is a very good number 2 receiver, and he could have the ability to be a really good number 1 if given the opportunity. But he was always a really good player. I watched a lot of him when he was at Minnesota, and we saw for the first time up to this point in his career him finally look like that. He's not overrated. If anything, he's underrated because he gets defined based off the first 2 years that he was in the NFL. Jalen Hurts is the definition of what it means to be overhated. And I'm going to be honest, I play a little bit into the hate somewhat. I believe Jalen Hurts is an elite quarterback. I just have him as the 5th or 6th best quarterback in the league right now, behind Jaden Daniels, only because Jaden Daniels did more with less. He had the Commanders 1 game shy of the Super Bowl, and if he had a team just as good as Jalen Hurts, he could have possibly been in the Super Bowl going toe-to-toe with Patrick Mahomes as well. But I give Jalen Hurts his roses because he's the only active quarterback who has beaten Patrick Mahomes in the Super Bowl. Do you know who the other quarterback is who has beaten Patrick Mahomes in the Super Bowl? Tom Brady, and he's retired. Jalen Hurts, despite not being as talented as what Lamar and Josh Allen are, he's been able to outplay Patrick Mahomes the 2 times he has seen him in the Super Bowl. And although he does benefit from having a stacked team, Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson have stacked teams, and yet they can't beat Patrick Mahomes. We have to stop hating on Jalen Hurts and just call a spade a spade. He is an elite quarterback, whether you want to admit it or not. He's one of the more consistent big game quarterbacks in this league. Every time when the lights are the brightest, in the most high-pressure moments, Jalen Hurts is like FedEx because he always delivers on time. And even in his worst playoff game against the Buccaneers, he didn't play bad where I fault him entirely for the way that game went. Jalen Hurts is an elite quarterback. Let's stop the hate. Michael Parsons, ever since he first got drafted, he's been one of the best pass rushers in the league. Jerry Jones needs to stop playing and go ahead and pay that man because you don't want to have to pay the price that he's going to demand at the end of next season because every year he's been in the NFL, he's had at least 12 sacks or more. And remind you that last year he had 12 sacks and he missed 4 games. Michael Parsons gets hated on because he has a podcast that he likes to yap on a lot, and sometimes he kind of disappears in big games. But if Michael Parsons was to get released right now by the Dallas Cowboys, everybody that hates on him will go from hating on him to becoming his biggest fan because you want this guy on your football team. No matter who you're a fan of, you want Michael Parsons. He is on his way to having a first ballot ticket to Canton, Ohio, with how dominant he's been this early into his career. Let me repeat this one more time. He has had 12 sacks or more every season that he's been in the NFL. And he had 12 sacks last year, missing 4 games. Based off the production that he had when he was on the field, he was on pace to leading the NFL in sacks. And he's good enough to where he could have 20 sacks or more in a single season. That's how good this guy is. Sauce Gardner, the guy has one off year, and all of a sudden, he no longer is a top 3, top 5 corner. Ridiculous. He's a holding merchant. He does a lot of grabbing. When you have the kind of size and length that Sauce Gardner does, and you kind of move a little bit slower when you watch him on TV, of course, it's going to look like he's doing a bunch of holding and grabbing, but he's just a tall, lanky corner. And he uses his size very well. And even though he had a down season last year, he still was an elite corner. Nobody wants to throw the Sauce Gardner side. Tell your favorite quarterback to throw to Sauce Gardner and see what happens. Either it's going to get picked off or it's going to be knocked down for an incompletion. Sauce Gardner having one off year for his standard. That's the thing. He had an off year for his standard. His first few seasons in the league, he's been a first-team All-Pro. So just because his down season wasn't as good as what we've seen from him his first couple of years doesn't mean that he no longer is elite. Because a down season for Sauce Gardner is still him being a top 5 corner in the game, which shows you how good this dude is. It's just utterly ridiculous how the tables have just flipped on this guy. He's one of my favorite players in the league. Put some respect on the Sauce. The Sauce. And then lastly, I got Aaron Rodgers. I never knew that throwing 27 touchdowns and only 11 interceptions was washed when he had more passing touchdowns last season than Josh Allen, who won MVP, Patrick Mahomes, and Matthew Stafford, along with a bunch of other quarterbacks who are supposed to be better than Aaron Rodgers. Yet Aaron Rodgers still put up top 7 quarterback numbers on the organization where quarterbacks' careers go to die. The Jets haven't had a quarterback have as good as a season as what Aaron Rodgers has had since Ryan Fitzpatrick was their starter. Year 1 under Todd Bowles when they magically won 10 games. That was it. Aaron Rodgers did his part. The Jets organization didn't. They fired their coach early during the season. The team just was a crapshoot from there. Was he responsible for a little bit of the disappointment that the Jets were last season? Absolutely. He deserves some accountability for skipping out of minicamp to go do ayahuasca, but he's with Mike Tomlin now. And if Mike Tomlin can win 9 games, having to play quarterbacks that would have gotten a lot of coaches fired, like Mitchell Trubisky, Kenny Two Small Hands Pickett, any quarterback like him with 2 gloves and long sleeves is one that you can't take seriously. And Mason Rudolph, a wash Russell Wilson, Justin Fields. The list goes on and on and on. Mike Tomlin, the floor with Aaron Rodgers is 9 wins. But the ceiling with Aaron Rodgers, if he has a similar career arc that we saw Brett Favre have and all of the other quarterbacks that have left the quarterback graveyard that is the Jets franchise, he should easily be able to bounce back to 80% of what he was with the Packers, and that'll be good enough for the Steelers to win a playoff game or two. But I think a large majority of the reason for the Aaron Rodgers hate is because of his political opinions. Look, I don't really care too much for what these players say or do off the field. As long as you're not breaking the laws or doing anything that you have no business doing, I don't really care what you do in your personal life. I'm talking about Aaron Rodgers, the football player, and he still is a lot better than the majority of quarterbacks in this league. So this is my list of the 6 most overhated players in the NFL right now entering the 2025 season.